Today's guest is Dr. Will Cole. Dr. Cole is a leading functional medicine practitioner, a New York Times bestselling author, and a pioneer in the telehealth medicine space. He grew up in rural Pennsylvania and he developed an early passion for nutrition and wellness that set him apart from his Rust Belt community. And this early foundation led him to become one of functional medicine's most innovative voices, launching the world's first functional medicine telehealth clinic 15 years ago. He has authored four influential books exploring the deep connections between diet, gut health, and emotional well being. And in our conversation, we explore his perspective on America's food system, the intersection of wellness and policy, and how finding presence in our daily lives might be the hidden key to making better health choices. We also talked about his involvement in the recent efforts to remove harmful food dyes from popular cereals such as Fruit Loops, as well as his vision for a more integrated approach to healthcare. Let's listen in. I know you grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh
Hmm.
and you currently live in Pittsburgh, which I find to be, interesting because it's not necessarily the wellness capital of the world or anything like that.
No.
But you do telehealth, and so you see 90% of your patients are elsewhere. So, in order for people to really appreciate your perspective, I would really love to hear you um, how you grew up. Like, what was your household
Yeah.
like,
So
and what were the philosophies and ideologies? You mentioned your mom was like into a bunch of healthy stuff, and
yeah, both of my
so yeah,
parents
talk
were.
to
Yeah, both of my parents were. So I grew up. It wasn't even in the suburbs. It was like very rural country, Western Pennsylvania, and I'm back here, living that simple life. That and I, but my way of growing up was different, I would say, than other people because it is the Rust Belt. I mean, we're talking about big areas of rural and urban food deserts. There's not a lot of, I mean, it's probably better now, but definitely in the 80s and 90s, it was not. It is, I think because of the internet, you can order things that you don't have access to locally. You didn't have
Mhm.
that growing up. So it was a lot of like food co-ops, organic health food stores that were there. The choices, the options we had weren't great, but I mean, we ate different than everybody else did in sort of the healthy, crunchy way of the time. My dad was a bodybuilder, and it was one of those things where I thought it was normal to have your dad like lubed up with baby oil and like a turquoise speedo, and you're like, remember those big, massive like camcorders, and
Yeah.
my dad would be posing on video, just try to get the poses just right in the sort of that bodybuilding world. And I'd go to the competitions and everything. So like that, I was in my as a like a kid of a bodybuilder. uh you ate and understood food differently, and beyond just the bodybuilding, my dad was interested in nutrition and wellness and health at that time. So yeah, that kind of was very different than the Rust Belt life around me, where it was a lot of fast food and chains and the food of the time, the standard American way of eating, and it's pretty much the same in many ways.
Did he
So
have a day job yet?
did I have a
Or
day
was
job?
no, did your dad have a day job or
Yeah,
was bodybuilding his
he was in health, he was in wellness, he kind of was in the natural health world, kind of getting people healthy. So so it definitely formed a lot of how I saw the world, how I saw how food impacts human health, and would have these like conversations as a kid. So then that evolved to me wanting to learn more about this. So I, as you said, my first job was at the finish line at the mall, and I used my paycheck to go to the health food store and buy the latest superfoods and herbs that was reading about, and really wanted to biohack before biohacking was a thing. And I made my family in, like, because I kind of moved to, I would say, the extreme, but I really loved it. It wasn't obsessive. It wasn't, negative at all. It wasn't disordered, but it was just like a passion to optimize and to experiment with food and nutrition and all these things that I was learning about. And I made my family look like the standard American in relative to me, because they were like, "What are you? Why are you packing your lunch at like 14 years old? Was I packing my lunch with these superfoods?" And I really stood out with like my peers at school, but I didn't care. Like I really just loved what I did, and anyways, it was just my thing. And then I wanted to be formally.
What were you reading? Like, how were you understanding these? Did you have a mentor in one of these
No,
health food
it
restaurants
was
that kind of
books.
guide you?
No, it was books in our house. It was old nutrition books in our house. So a lot of like this is like the world that I'm in now. I know all these guys. I not all of them, but I know like Andrew Weil was one. He was now in his
Hmm.
80s.
8 Weeks to Optimum Health. Was
Yeah, I
that
mean
one
he
of the
had so
books?
many books. I don't remember all the titles, but yeah, he was like, I mean, even before he was part of like the psychedelic movement and the Nixon, the Reagan administration came after him with the war on drugs, with this wanting to uh, research psychedelics and understand the sort of the health implications of them, and beyond psychedelics, just herbs and foods and real foods, and understanding the environmental connection to it all. So it was books from Andrew Weil that really were formative to me. And now he's in his 80s, and I'm like friends with him, and it's such a cool thing to be. He's to me is such a legend, and he started one of my favorite restaurants, True Food Kitchen. Shout out to TFK. Go to True
Mhm.
Food Kitchen whenever you can. And Jason Karp's now involved with them too, is another friend of mine. So anyway, so these guys that were in me, like to me, like the superheroes of the world, were very formative. Jordan Rubin is another one I'm now friends with too. Like he had a book. It was, I think, self-published. It then was republished with the publisher, but somehow had his like self-published book called Patient Heal Thyself. And it was a stark contrasted picture of him with Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel issues on one side, emaciated, sickly, and then the other side, the sort of virile, strong, a healthy guy. And it was all about health food, sort of Hippocratic concept of healing yourself with food. And yeah, so it was those type of guys reading books from people like that that really took my passion to the next level.
Did you go to public schools, private schools? Like, what was your schooling situation like growing
I
up?
love that you're asking this, man. This is good stuff. You're really getting to the weeds here. I went to a private Christian school all the way up until I was in my junior year. My junior year and my senior year, I went to a public school.
So the food was probably better than public school food, but you still brought your
No,
lunch
no,
regardless.
these were like poor, I would say like poor, generally like homeschooling-ish type people. No, it was, I don't know how bad the public school food was, but it was like pizza. It was
It
like the
wasn't.
local
I
pizza
can tell
joint.
you,
No, no,
it
no.
wasn't great.
No, no, no.
Probably
You would
pizza and
think,
milk.
I mean, look, that's my gripe with religious sort of institutions like the church, in the sense of like you're talking about your body as the temple of the Holy Spirit, but why are you serving God such crap every day? I have a problem with that, because they should know better. Like Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. They should do better, but churches don't. They don't, as you probably know too. But yeah, you would think, but no, it was probably just as bad as the public schools as far as food is concerned. Now, the environment itself was very nice. I'm a very loving, like group of people. I mean, so I had no problem with the school itself, but the food, no bueno.
Mm. All right. So there's history in your family of autoimmune conditions, Hashimoto's,
Yeah,
thyroiditis, all this.
yeah.
So with that, right, and watching how your parents sort of kind of talked about it and maybe how they help people navigate it, or maybe
Mhm.
they were experiencing it themselves, I don't know, but was there a sense of empowerment around this, or was there a sense of, oh, we need to go to the doctor, we need to go to the doctor, we need to take these pills, we need to take this
No,
medication?
yeah, well, my extended family, yes, and then so they have I have autoimmune conditions on both sides of my family, so that looks like autoimmune thyroid issues, neurological inflammatory issues like MS type issues, um, other inflammatory bowel issues as well on both sides of the family. And then, yeah, so I think for the most part, you would see that those people would go the traditional medicine route, which has its place, but you just didn't see them really getting better, right? It was kind of like, wow, they were managing their disease. This is better than not managing the disease. But was there another path? Was there a path towards optimizing and healing, and like what is the body capable of when you give it the chance to do so? So that was something that, it was formative for me too, because of just looking of. And then even later on, like through my own health journey, I started seeing inflammation issues kind of rise up for my own self, and I wanted to say, what could I do to really? That was another motivating factor beyond just it being a passion of me. When I was eating a way that was predominantly plant-based, and for a time exclusively plant-based, it was better than the standard American diet, but I saw, okay, look, this isn't jiving with my biochemistry long term, so I could optimize it and figure it out within the confines of what I thought was better way of eating, plant-based. But then I find, in hindsight, it can become ways of eating, just like so many other things, can be become part of your identity. And when you kind of confine yourself to, you limit yourself from pivoting and evolving, because you think, what served you for a season has to be your identity forever and ever. So I think that for me, it was learning, no, it's okay to pivot. It's part of being human. And again, when you know better, you do better. How does that propel you to do the next right thing for yourself in this season, in this moment? So um yeah, I was always wanting to figure out, how can you optimize your health in the best way, and for myself, but also I wanted to impart it in my family as well.
I definitely want to spend a lot of time talking about that because I think we have that in common. I was vegan for I think 12 years. You were plant-based for what, 10 years or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that. Years
Hmm.
back. But I just have a couple more questions from your superhero origin story, you know.
Yeah, let's go there.
What was when you were growing up, what was your idea of success? Like having watched your parents and watched the world in Western Pennsylvania. What were
Mm,
you thinking for yourself? This is before you went to college and all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff. Just
I really didn't.
teenager.
I don't know. I don't know if I thought. I guess it would just be finding something that brought you joy, and like really something that you could be in a flow state. If I had to think about how I saw the world back then, it would be something like that. It would be like, well, what is bringing you purpose? What is bringing you joy? What is, like, when you're doing it, you're fully present and like dialed into being a channel. I would say I wasn't, and my family will tell you this even today. Like, I'm not motivated by money. I'm not motivated by like the flashy things, or like, of course I like comfort. I'm not saying I'm like some sort of like saint, but I'm not so motivated by that stuff. And it's a blessing and a curse. Like, it is like a blessing to not always be in that frenetic FOMO way of being, but it can be difficult because you get stuck in like a routine of like doing your own thing, and you don't necessarily want to hear everybody else's opinion because you just want to stay focused on being a channel. So I've learned to try to balance it out a little bit and ask for help, and to seek other people's opinion when the time is right.
So as you were filling out your application for USC, and is it USC you went to or
It's
Southern
SCU, so it's an integrative medicine
SCU?
school, Southern
Okay,
California University of Health Sciences. Yeah, it's
got it.
yeah.
Okay, so when you were filling out that form, what were you thinking your life was going to be like? Like what was your idea of
I
okay, I'm going to go there, I'm going to get this degree, and then what?
I knew that I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to help people within functional medicine really early on. So my entire I was one of the youngest ones in my school, because I took summer classes in my undergrad. I was tenacious in wanting to get it over with, get the schooling over with so I could go and help people. To me, like, the degree, the training was like a means to an end. Another life lesson that I would, if I could go back and do it over again, I would, because I was just like looking to the future as like, okay, when I get to have my degree, when I have my doctorate, I will, well, then I could go and help people, versus like soaking in that time, that incubation period, that learning period, and loving learning versus seeing learning as a means to an end. I would go back and do that differently. So what I was thinking about when I applied was, this is a means to an end. Let's get through this. Let's get through this. I want to get this doctorate, but but when I get the doctorate, that's when I can help people. That's when my life can start. And I didn't necessarily enjoy the training so much, because I was thinking like, I have so much stuff to do. Time is ticking. And that, I don't know, it was a massive drive to like get it done, get it done, get it done, versus maybe a balanced approach I would do today. At least I'd like to think I would, where I would, yes, I'd have a purpose to like an end goal, but how can you appreciate this moment where it maybe seem mundane or arduous, studying and doing all the training. Like I like loathed loathed many parts of it, because it was just seemed like a waste of time to get to my end goal, which is to help people, once I quote unquote arrived. But it served me well. I can't go back and change it, because I graduated and I started the first functional medicine telehealth clinic in the world. I didn't call it that back then. I called it a virtual functional medicine clinic, because that was my plan. That was my plan, is to get through school, get my doctorate, and go and help people around the world. So it was just like nose to the ground, in my lane, relentlessly pursuing this goal.
You've mentioned in a few places how this guy, Dr. Karazian,
Datis Karazian,
influ-
yeah.
how he influenced you. What did you see in him or feel with him in his presence that kind of inspired you?
Well, he was one of those, I would say, the earlier voices in functional medicine. He still, as far as I know, teaches for IFM, the Institute for Functional Medicine. So all the Cleveland Clinic has a functional medicine center. All the doctors there are trained through what's called IFM, the Institute for Functional Medicine. So myself, my team's trained through them. Datis Karazian, who'd gone to my school before me, and that's how I heard about him, because he was this sort of voice within functional medicine. Yeah. So it was just, I think, just like Andrew Weil and Jordan Rubin were earlier on as a child, adolescent, teenager, for me. People like Datis Karazian and Jeffrey Bland were early voices within functional medicine that really, to me, narrowed down, versus what I would say like Jordan Rubin and Andrew Weil were more like larger integrative medicine, like hallmarked just decades of using food as medicine and herbs as medicine and natural therapeutics, mind body practices, all these things. All of that stuff's contained within functional medicine, but it's a little bit more of a granular way of seeing. And to me, I think it's a both and, not either or approach to healthcare, which really I thought was an innovative way of doing things. And that's another sort of governing, I think, through line in my life, was seeing these sort of tribalism within all spheres of the world, and it really just it's doesn't appeal to me. It's very tired, and I think having an integrative both and approach, in the best of Western medicine, which in my opinion is diagnostics and research, all of that stuff, and the best of alternative complementary natural medicine, of you actually getting people healthy. And I think we can have a both and approach of like, what is the most effective option for people that's not causing them side effects, and having this approach. So that was what turned me on to, instead of it just being general natural medicine, a specific, I think, subset within natural medicine and functional medicine, early on really appealed to me.
Hey, so a lot of you all have been reaching out with your guest suggestions. And look, I appreciate it. I do. And to help make it easier for those guests to say yes to my invitation, I need you to subscribe to this channel. Just hit the subscribe button below, and that's literally the best way to help me get you that guest on my podcast. All right. Thank you so much for helping out, and back to the show. So you mentioned you have a clinic that's been around for 15 years. It's
Yeah.
telehealth, or is it telemedicine,
Yeah.
functional medicine
Yeah.
clinic. So I know from my own experience, and I've been around this kind of, holistic healthcare system. Um, I've been in the meditation and yoga and wellness space for over 20 years. And one thing that you sort of get indoctrinated to believe when you go through your training is that everything needs to be done in person, everything needs to be
Mm.
done, very close to the people that you're serving.
Yeah.
And if you do something, if you try to teach somebody meditation through a book, if you try to do it online, you're doing a disservice to the patient. So there's this sort of block that
Yeah.
someone who sees the potential of using technology
Mm-hmm.
to help more people, that you have to overcome, or at least I'll speak for myself, that I had to overcome in order to
Mm-hmm.
do the things that I'm doing now. And now it's
Yeah.
just kind of common, it's a common approach
Yeah.
to use technology. Did
Yeah.
you have that back 15 years ago? I'm sure in your clinic they talked about, the importance of
Yeah. Yeah, people
treating
didn't get
people.
it. People didn't get it. I would say that's definitely true. People or they would be like, "How are you doing that? Like, what's that look like? Don't you have to see people in person?" Like, we weren't doing physical exams. Obviously, there are certain aspects that are you're not going to do in telehealth. I mean, we're not replacing their local PCP. We're not replacing their local specialist. We are providing them a functional medicine perspective and guidance and clinical insight, and monitoring and getting them healthy. So again, both and not either or. Yeah, people didn't get it. There was like a certain percentage of people that got it, right? We grew our clinic that way, but it obviously we did not plan for a pandemic. But in 2020, like the percentage of people that got it really got it because they found, they thought, they discovered, wow, we're doing a lot of life very inefficiently to just do the basic things that you don't need to drive an hour in traffic to find parking, to go sit in a waiting room for an hour to go see the doctor for 5 minutes. Like it doesn't make sense most times when you're talking about optimal health. Yes, it's needed sometimes, but and then many spheres, even outside of health, like even like with what you do, right? People think, well, you have to do it this way, and there's only one way. And again, it's not that it. There's some things that are completely. There's something ineffable energetically being in person. So I absolutely know that, right? But I both and approach to get people world class support and guidance in functional medicine. You don't need that energetic exchange all the time, and it is an interesting thing where you can hold. I'm saying this because I know people roll their eyes, but to hold space with for people that are going through heavy things, you don't need to be in the same room with them because I have that energy exchange completely the same online, that I need to achieve the goals. Like if you look at the outcomes, we're healing people, we're getting people better, we're improving their labs, we're optimizing their health. Their body doesn't care if I'm in the room with them or not because we're providing them that oversight and guidance and tools and support that they need to achieve their goals. So I haven't seen it be an impediment to seeing results and improving labs.
Why did you decide to go back to Pittsburgh? I mean, you were in Southern California where people are actively looking for this kind of
Yeah,
stuff, and there's not enough to go around. And then you
yeah,
go back to a place where I imagine nobody's looking for this stuff,
yeah.
and you got to, pull a gun on people to get them to come in and see you to deal with the root causes of their issues.
Well, I knew it's like, yeah, I knew this the telehealth again, virtual approach to health because I was writing about functional medicine online on websites like Mind Body Green, like how we met. Early on, we're talking about the mid 2000s, like early mid 2000s when this started, and then obviously all the years after that. But yeah, so to me, I was there not for my career. I was there for a simpler life. I was there to raise my kids. I was there because I had two little. My wife was pregnant actually when we moved out of LA. My son was 2 or 3 years old. So it was a young family knowing LA was not like for us in that way. And actually, I don't know what I would have done. It was actually my wife who wanted to move more than I did, and she's from Los Angeles. She's like a Los Angelino through and through, but she doesn't. She was like in LA, but not of LA. She was missionary. like a nurse missionary in Uganda in the jungles of if East Central Africa. So she wanted we compromised somewhere between LA and Kampala was Western Pennsylvania. So I we landed there and still living that simple life, but you know, not as remote. I could still like do my things here in the States.
Have you treated a lot of your family members since you're in the area, or do they kind of do you just kind of keep that separate and just let
Yeah,
they just see you
I
as
have family all
me
over
or
the
whatever?
place. I have family all over the place. So yeah, people ask me a lot. Like it's definitely what's my take on this? What's my take on that? It's part of yeah, I just expect it. I expect it. Yeah. But it's an honor, right? It's an honor that to be thought of where people want to know what I think on things. And yeah, so I get what's my hot take on any given health related thing. It's a daily thing for me. And not just for family, but friends and of people that I've met. They yeah they and I feel bad because they don't always get around to answering everything because it's like at the end of the day of seeing patients, I just have like a list of texts and emails and people wanting my perspective on things. So I don't always get back in the timeliest of manners, but I'm doing my best here.
I went to go see an Ayurvedic doctor in LA. Well, I've seen a lot of different practitioners, man. I've done the iridologist thing. I've done the person who looks at your tongue and reads your pulse. I've always like sought out that kind of alternative care throughout my life. But I remember going to see this Ayurvedic doctor, and he, of course, talked about feelings and talked about um, your relationships and
Hmm.
all of this and how all this can affect. And then he gave me this protocol of like 15 things that I had to do every day,
Yeah.
which of course I didn't do
Yeah.
because it's too much. And I'm sure, when you get trained in functional medicine and you're dealing with root causes, you have to consider all these things. But what did you find when you first started out in the field, right? Dealing with real people with real issues. What did you find that translated the best? What did you find that was harder than you thought it was going to be? And in terms of your relationship with your patients and how people responded to, I'm sure it was great information you were giving them, but you sometimes, even as a meditation person, I had to scale my stuff down, man. I was giving way too much information in the first,
Hmm.
few years. And now I just try to keep things very, very simple.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the duality of, I think, a lot of practitioners or doctors or clinicians, coaches, whatever. If you're dealing with people, teachers, are another example of that, there's a science and art to what we do, right? And the science is like, we know all this stuff now. Like, let's just like push a square peg through a round hole because this is the way. But the art, you cannot ignore the art part. And the art part is that resonance between the person understanding the headspace and heart space and where they're at in their journey at this point in their time and evolving the protocol or the recommendation or the tools to where they're at this point in their life. So you craft that, you have like an intuitive skill set over time of seeing people to allow you to pragmatically be the most progressive in getting them better, but in something that's going to be realistic and sustainable for them, something they can stick with, and something that they are. It's not going to be a source of obsession or dread, or they're going to hate. And you don't always get it right, but you can, even if you don't get it right the first time, you can further pivot what you're doing. Because Plan B, if Plan B, meaning that if it wasn't your original recommendation, right? Plan A was like it wasn't sustainable for them. They were overwhelmed. How could you tell me to do all this stuff? I can't do it. Even though yeah, you can do it, but they're getting in their own way for whatever reason, or they're making excuses. Like their excuses are bigger than their why, and that's okay. Their excuses are big, and their why is not big enough. So we have to shift that. If you can shift your recommendation to Plan B, but Plan B is a source of joy. Plan B isn't what you planned, but it's something that's realistic and practical for them and they can stick with over time. Plan B ends up being more effective than Plan A because of all those things I just mentioned. So yeah, it's something that I'm sure in your world too, like you kind of can craft that and formulate and curate a protocol that checks all those boxes for those people. And the idealist in me, especially certain people on my team, like other functional coaches and nutritionists on my team that haven't been in this world as long as I have, they're more idyllic in that sense. Like, no, plan A, we know it can get them better if they just do plan A. Yes, but they're not going to do plan A. You cannot shift their entire paradigm overnight. So go to plan B, stick with plan B. When they start feeling better and seeing the changes and they have more resilience and bandwidth and maybe trust in you as a practitioner, but also confidence in themselves that they can do it. And when people feel better, they want to do the things that love them back, then they can pivot to plan A down the road. So yeah, it's my secret stealth plan that I just shared to everybody. But that's it's what you have to do sometimes to get people better.
So when you're talking about health across the board, right? What's what's something that people can do? Let's say they don't have some ailment that drives them to see someone like you, but they just want to be healthier in general, right? What's something that they can do to get a quick win when it comes to feeling better? Whether it's like walking or drinking more water, or is there anything that just without having to know a whole, life story about somebody's background,
Yeah.
what are like maybe one or two things that people can do starting today to just feel better?
Well, I mean, and we see a lot of people that do want just to do like that, just that. They want to optimize. They know their energy isn't the way they want to be. They know that their nervous system's a little bit dysregulated. They know their digestion's not. So they're not like diagnosed with an autoimmune issue, but they know they're not living their best selves. And they want labs to figure out, okay, what is that? But let's just remove that for a moment. So if someone's just like, hey, I don't want a functional medicine doctor, but I know I want to feel better than I am feeling right now, then I would say, look, number one, I would say, look at what I call the inflammatory core four. These are four food ingredients or foods that I would say would be the most likely to be problematic for the human microbiome and the human immune system, i.e., inflammation. Number one would be gluten. This is in no particular order, so don't like come at me, people, with saying like he said this is worse than that. I'm not saying that. So number one would be gluten containing grains. Now look, we can have a nuanced contextual conversation. Is it the gluten? Is it what we've done to it? I think it's probably a bit of both. We've hybridized it, we've sprayed it with herbicides and pesticides, we're not properly preparing it from an ancestral preparation standpoint, like soaking it and fermenting it, et cetera, to break down some of these plant compounds. So I understand that. But for the sake of simplicity, looking at gluten and then either properly getting better for you versions of it or avoiding it for a time. Number two would be industrial seed oils. Kind of controversial. Like, is it really that bad? But it's the overconsumption, in my opinion, of foods that are packaged and include ingredients like industrial seed oils, like canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil. These are things that are high in omega-6, which a high omega-6 diet has been shown to increase inflammation, which is the commonality between just about every health problem. But you can get better for you versions of these polyunsaturated fatty acid oils, these industrial seed oils. But I would say limiting or avoid them. On top of that, the way that they're processed and refined, they're kind of pro-oxidative and kind of not the cleanest of ingredients. Third would be added sugar, which most people know that. But even the nicer sounding euphemisms for sugar, like look at the label, educate yourself, empower yourself with knowing the words on the back of a label. Look at the grams of added sugar in a label. Things like agave nectar look super, it's greenwashed terms, right? It's like looks so natural because it's just like they're squeezing agave into that glass and it's just so farm to table you can't even help yourself. But the reality is it's still refined processed sugar that's lacking fiber, which is going to spike your blood sugar and impact a lot of things in the body. And then fourth would be conventional dairy. Again, nuanced conversation. I'm not against dairy. I think raw dairy, grass-fed dairy, A2 dairy can be really wonderful. But the average dairy people are consuming is a shell of itself. It's homogenized, it's pasteurized, it's denatured, it impacts enzymes and protein, and it's just not the nutrient dense food that it should be because of modern farming practices. So if I know that was more than two, but if you could just lump those things and saying that, making that one, like, so I'm going to follow your rules of saying two things, it would be look at the inflammatory core four. And if I had to have a plus one, it would be alcohol. I think it's one of those things that have been kept within people that quote unquote eat healthy, but still have alcohol on a consistent basis. And then there's no healthy amount of alcohol. So I would look at that. And then number two, if you want to make that food, like, what do you want to have instead? I would say focus on a lot of people have unhealthy guts. The human microbiome is really having a tough time out there, and focusing on more soups and stews, things that are gentle, these sort of things that, our ancestors would have made when people were sick, that sort of cliche of chicken noodle soup when you're sick. It's not the noodle part that's so restorative. It's the broths, it's the soft vegetables, the pureed vegetables, it's the soft meat. So I would say that bringing more soups and grounding foods, restorative foods for your gut health is going to be two. And then if I had one more mind body practice, it would be the more nebulous side of health, but still just as important, is not just what we're serving our body with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but what are we serving our head? What are we serving our heart on a daily basis? And this sort of overlaps on that Venn diagram with your work of, like, how do you take your thoughts captive and really start to address your relationship with the present moment. And using me as an example in college of just not using the present moment as a means to an end. A lot of people do that, and it really creates a lot of inner resistance and anxiety in our life, and that impacts inflammation and our gut health just as much as a food that didn't love us back. So I think that this sort of, I talk about gut feelings, sort of the gut and the feeling side, both and approach here again to health is really important.
What is the present moment? How do you access the present moment?
What is it's like the biggest question in the world, right? That's like what a moment. It's everything. And life happens in that.
What I mean though, Dr. Cole's in a real world sense, like somebody just heard you say be in the present moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have, my 9 to 5 job. I was gonna go to What's a Burger today, but now that you've talked about what's, you know, gluten and added seed oils, now I'm rethinking that. But how do I get into the present moment so I can figure out what the best choices for me are, the choices that are loving me back?
Yeah, and I don't it's very I'm talking to somebody, like, everybody knows this. Light knows light years more than me on this stuff. But what I would say here for everybody, from my perspective, is it's ineffable. And the minute you try to define it with words, you're diminishing what it is. But I would say it's less of a definition using human language and more of an experience that when you're in it. So I would say my best advice in this circumstance is to find an anchor to the present moment. So those anchors that kind of shut down the reactive mind, where you're worrying about the future, or you're regretting the past, and you can shut that down for a moment, and can have that peace that passes understanding. To me, what has worked for me personally and to our telehealth patients are things like breath work, meditation, inner body awareness, like just being mindful of your body, um, grounding, like getting in nature and connecting with nature. Those moments where, yes, you still have your mind, but you're using your mind instead of your mind using you, and you are realizing you're not your thoughts and emotions, you're the observing presence of them. That's what I talk about presence. It's something where the reactive mind is the monkey mind, as it was known, is not always chattering and going, and you're not confusing yourself for your thoughts and emotions. I think that, to me, is what the present moment is, because you can make more mindful, guided, proactive, not reactive decisions in your life, right? If somebody's grounded in the present moment to a certain degree, we're not sort of all like saints or monks, but we are having at least some anchor to the present moment, you're way more likely to make decisions that love you back because you're not sort of stuck in that reactive mode. Because many people will stress eat, or they aren't eating
Mhm.
foods that love them back because they're so numbed and distracted and not fully grounded or not partially grounded to realize what are the things that love them back in life. So to me, I think that headspace and heart space, at least cultivating some awareness there, will anchor them enough to start making more mindful decisions into when it comes to food or habits or relationships that don't love them back. Maybe they'll have a lot more intuition on that, and governance and agency in their life.
I love that, man. I love that we're talking about this because, they talk about how don't go to the grocery store hungry because you're going to end up buying
Yeah.
things that probably are not going to love you back. But I think a larger um, understanding when it comes to this integrative approach to health is don't go through life with regrets, with worry, with anger,
Mhm.
with sadness, because you're not going to make choices in life that love you back when you do that. And so I think a part of this approach that I'm hearing you say is that you have to somehow break that cycle. And it's not just that, you want to use the anchor as a case of emergency, breathe, do
Mhm.
breath work. You want it to become a regular part of your routine so that you are preparing yourself for tomorrow's drama or tomorrow's twist and turn that's inevitably going to come. And those
Yeah.
are the moments where we fall off the wagon. And even in my own experience, when I'm
Mhm.
going through stuff, like it's harder for me to go work out. It's harder for me to eat
Mhm.
properly. And you have these important sounding excuses that you use to justify pretty much whatever your emotions
Mhm.
are telling you to do. And I don't think people realize how much their emotions, particularly those distressful emotions, are
Mhm.
and can run the show,
Mhm.
especially if you haven't established some sort of foundation for
Yeah.
that presence that you talked about.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because life's going to happen. Life's going to happen. So, how are you going to move through it? Are you going to be completely rattled at every given situation that doesn't go your way? You're going to be at the whims of the reactive mind and the whims of life, can oftentimes be chaotic. But if I've heard a lot of teachers over the years talk about, like, we mistake ourselves for the when there's a storm on the ocean, we mistake ourselves for the violent waves. We mistake our life for the violent waves, and all we see is just the surface of that ocean. But you go down just a couple feet, let alone the full depths of the ocean. There's a stillness there, and I think that we can still acknowledge, yes, things are happening on the surface, but it's not everything that I am. And these sound philosophical, but it's actually really not. It's a knowing of the full um, breadth of who you are. And I think that these practices that you teach allow people to discover all that they are, and they're not just the little me that you think you are on a day-to-day basis. You're a lot more expansive than that.
So let's say you start your inner work, your breath work, whatever meditation practice, but now you recognize, hey, I've got some cleaning up to do in my in terms of my diet. Um, you mentioned not drinking alcohol. Obviously, that's good, and the conventional dairy and the added sugar and the seed oils and the gluten free. Um, is there you've written 4 books,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure you're working on another book right now because that's what people who write 4 books do. They are always working on something.
I'll be
You've written
honest with
about
you,
gut feelings.
I'm not actually started. I'm not working on it. I'm not. I've been focusing entirely on the telehealth clinic and the podcast, but I will be soon. And the reason for this, sorry for interrupting, is my son, it was going to college, and I didn't want any more distractions. I wanted to, like, just fully focus on him for these months that I had with him. But now that he's in and settled, I'll probably start back up again. You're right. Yeah.
But all your books are focused on diet. You practice
Yeah.
ketotarianism, which I'm sure is a term you made up
Yeah, it was.
to brand for your book. The inflammation spectrum, intuitive fasting, gut healings.
Gut feelings.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about just And I'm sure I hate people, get me on a podcast and can you just give us like, how do you meditate? And it's like, well, it's not so simple.
Just tell me. Yeah.
But there are a couple things that people can do, like sit comfortably and not fight your mind too much. So when it comes to optimizing for the diet part of the integrative health regimen, um, what are some of the recommendations that you have, again, that can apply sort of generally speaking?
Hmm.
Obviously there are all kinds of exceptions, and you have to
Yeah. Well,
understand people's situations.
yeah, for sure. And each book's a different conversation, right? That a different application, a different tool within the toolbox. So I kind of mentioned the inflammatory core four. I mentioned these soups and stew concepts. I think that's a good starting point for everybody. Now, each book is like a deeper conversation in a different way with these conversations. So Ketotarian was sort of a Mediterranean, more plant forward way of doing the ketogenic diet, which has a lot of exciting science around it. And it's something, a clinical tool that we've used for a long time with telehealth patients. So each book's kind of born out of countless conversations I've had with telehealth patients and wanting to educate people in a different way and also use as a resource for patients. So Ketotarian was vegan keto, actually, vegetarian keto, pescatarian keto, things like extra virgin olive oil and avocados and wild caught fish and these sort of polyphenol, antioxidant rich, good monounsaturated fats and whole food polyunsaturated fats, not these industrial seed oils like wild caught fish, omega-3, fatty acids, and good saturated fats too. So that was Ketotarian. The inflammation spectrum was a deeper dive in inflammation and talking about food, but also non-food things that impact inflammation, like that monkey mind that I talked about, and the science around that, and a deeper understanding of autoimmunity and inflammation issues. So it involves like sort of tailored elimination diet approaches within that book. Intuitive fasting was just my conversations with patients that I then put in a book of how do you use fasting as a medicine and fasting as a meditation, and really bringing a more mindful awareness and using fasting as a meditation. And these are, again, humans would have done this for thousands of years, use fasting as a medicine and meditation, and really exploring what does that look like in a modern way. No matter where your ancestors came from, they probably use fasting for both of those purposes. And it was cyclical, it was intuitive, it's not always doing the same thing all the time, but it's using it as sort of a pulsed meditation and medicine. So that's what intuitive fasting was about. And it was kind of part two of Ketotarian in a way. Like I wanted to use it as a way to get more recipes in that were Ketotarian esque with people, because ketogenic diet is fasting mimicking. So it was a way people would ask me, like, I love Ketotarian, but can you get more recipes? So I used intuitive fasting to like get more recipes because it works with the science of ketosis. Both fasting and the ketogenic diet both tap into what Paracelsus, the father of toxicology, said. Who's also a mystic and like completely amazing human being. He called fasting the physician within, which I think is a beautiful way of putting it. Is like tapping into these inner healing, not just spiritually healing, but physically healing as well. And then Gut Feelings was probably my least food book. It was talking about how how chronic stress and unresolved trauma impact inflammation levels, and it can be stored in the body. So it's dealing with both gut and feelings and this bidirectional relationship between how physical health, like our gut health and environmental toxins and things like this, impact our thoughts and emotions, but then how do our thoughts and emotions impact our physical health, and this crosstalk between the two. So there's expansive things you can learn within my space. So I tried to kind of have individual conversations between each book so they could have at it. I mean, that's the benefits of reading a book, right? They can just learn, and not everybody's gonna necessarily want to do everything in all the books, but they're gonna learn something in each of the books.
So you just mentioned that you're not writing a book because you want to spend time with your son, right? Because
Yeah.
obviously writing a book takes a lot of energy
Yeah.
and it's a long, drawn out process and all that. So having been around these sort of mind body green revitalize places, and just your own colleagues and associates, I think a lot of professionals who hear things like this and they hear, oh, this guy wrote all these books, and maybe there's something special about him where he can do all this, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just busy, with my schedule, my calendar, my
Mm-hmm.
family, my kids. What do you see as the difference? Like, how are how are you able to produce all of this content
Mm-hmm.
with everything you got going on? You're seeing patients from morning to
Mm-hmm.
evening. You got a family, relationship. That's a whole other kind of part-time job. Keeping that going.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you? Well, yeah. Just talk a little bit
Yeah.
about how you make this all happen, and how can somebody listening to this? What's like some of the first steps they can do to move in that direction
Yeah.
if they want to become a little more of a thought leader?
Look, I'm going to say something that may sound a bit callous, or, I know there's exceptions to what I'm going to say, and people may don't get like when people say things like this, but I'm going to say it regardless. Is that we all have the same hours in the day, right? We all have the same hours in the day. The difference is how much support you have. How much access do you have? I know there's a lot of variables there, but at the end of the day, a lot of us, the big percentage of things, we all have the same hours. Like, what are we going to do with the time that we have? And it's going to look different for different people. I'm not saying everybody, the outcome is going to be the same. And some people have massive disadvantages. I know that. But at the end of the day, I am not special. And at the end of the day, if you when people see things on social media, or they hear podcasts, or they read books, they think there's some massive advantage. They think that there's a massive machine behind them, that there's some massive money behind them that allows you to have this mystique of whatever their perception is of you, right? And I'm like nothing compared to what the celebrity culture that people have, let alone a little doctor like me. But when people see our space within health, and like the guys that are and women are writing the books and doing the podcast, doing the things, they think there's some glamorous apparatus that is propelling them to that. And I have to say, we all like, and I know these people, and and it's not like that. It's not. It just takes a tenacious, like that thing that propelled me through school, that sort of, when people say it as a pejorative of like, stay in your lane, I feel like I've always used that concept to the positive. Like, how can I stay in my lane and be true to my calling? How can I be a channel to me? How can I be a channel for God in this life? How can I be of service to people? And do I always get it right? Absolutely not. Do I fail all the time? Absolutely. Which, again, you don't necessarily see that on social media, but it's just part of being someone that's in that relentless pursuit of doing your calling, and allowing that to come to fruition. So there's this creative force that I would say, when someone's found their lane, there is a creative force that happens, and there's different seasons in that, right? You're not always going to be doing the books. You're not always going to be doing the things. There's a lot of unsung, unseen seasons that are just as important and formative. But that's what I would say that comes to mind. The second is this: have an amazing team around you. Like, I am not doing this by myself. I'm not saying it's a glamorous apparatus, but I'm saying there's a few people on my team that are just amazing people that I do get to do life with, that are supportive of our goal as a telehealth clinic. So I do not do it by myself, but it's not some massive apparatus. It's just, like, I would say, scrappy people that are hard workers and want to get stuff done. And it's like perpetual startup land. It's just what it is. When you kind of work for yourself, do your own thing, you just have to show up. And which I would say, that sort of entrepreneurial, whatever, you don't work for a corporation spirit that a lot of us are in. There's not always a structure. And I have to say this, that I am highly structured. Like, I have a day of patience. I have to say, I see a lot of people in my life that are in that sort of entrepreneurial, I work for myself type of space, but that lack of structure, they need to impose structure in their life to allow themselves to come to full fruition, because I see people floundering, like they're like at the whim of the day, and they have no structure for their day. And maybe some personalities don't need the structure, but I think a lot of people do, and I think a lot of greatness can be honed whenever you are focusing that light into that lane of what you're doing, versus just, again, that 10-hour day that you're working or whatever. If you don't have structure, like, how are you channeling what you're supposed to be doing? So I would say create structure in your life is another advice that I would say. um if you feel like you're not being productive. And it's just easy for me, because when you see patients online, you have to have structure. So everything's blocked out through the day, but I feel like it really has served me well as having that structure, because I'll show up and get the work done and not have excuses or get distracted, or I just have to do it in the day. Um, and then, yeah, so those are the biggest advice I would say. And then, like, for me, like, practically, if you're asking about books, it's just finding a literary agent, which is like, maybe, like, doesn't need to be said, but I do think that, to me, getting someone that was in that space, if they're interested in writing a book, that I'm not in that literary space, but have someone that can support you and give you guidance on what to do in that. And to be honest with you, I never would have thought I would have 4 books written in my 30s. I never thought I would do that. I never thought I would do that. Because I was, again, I saw patients for a living. Like, I didn't, how would that translate to books? But it was sort of a way that I could help people that maybe didn't want, or knew they, could have a functional medicine doctor, but how could I help them in a different, unique way? And I have to say too, I always loved writing. I always loved writing. I was, like, always obsessed with writing. And I told you, reading books growing up. So for me, it wasn't like this thing that I had to do because everybody else was doing it. I genuinely had a passion for writing books and writing as a whole. So to me, it was like a natural expression of what I was passionate about.
Hey, really quickly, if you like this content or if you don't like it, let me know down in the comments, because your likes and comments are going to help me learn what you want more of. And then that way, I can keep bringing you the good stuff. All right? Thanks so much for your feedback, and back to the show.
Not only have you written these books, but you are a New York Times bestselling author. And um, having written book, I'm not a New York Times bestselling author. I understand that it's very difficult
Well, let me just,
to.
that's for everybody. It's a complete, look, I'm thankful for it. So thank you, the New York Times. But the way it's done, it's not based on sales. I don't want to say it's a sham, but it's pretty much a sham, because
Well, I was going to say, was it a strategy for you
no,
to go after that, or
no,
was it you just
obviously,
lucky?
it wasn't at all. So I obviously, we all wanted as books to come out, but there's no way of, in my mind, I gave it to God, because I was like, Lord, I you can't control this. I know people that have sold way more books than me that didn't make the list.
Mhm.
So I know it's based off of, like, a highly curated, whoever the editor is for that week is going to cherry pick what they think. And yes, sales are part of it, but it's not based on direct sales. So I know it was at the whim of the week. And here's the crazy part. I've sold the book that made it, actually, Intuitive Fasting made it. Ketotarian sold way more than Intuitive Fasting
Mhm.
and didn't make it. So to me, it's like, I think the Amazon sales are way more indicative. I think the world should esteem Amazon sales more than New York Times, because it's based on direct sales.
Mhm.
So that's my
Mhm.
soapbox when it comes to the book world. But and the New York Times should, in my opinion, the New York Times should give us their algorithm. Then show us your algorithm on how you pick books, because otherwise it's like this sort of, like, mysterious, nebulous thing that nobody even knows. And I think we should move away from that and just base it on sales, or they should expose, like, share how they pick these books.
But their whole reason for not doing that is because they know that certain people will
Yeah.
spend money
Yeah.
to try to hack that
Right.
process.
Yeah. Who knows what they do? I know there's certain bookstores, independent bookstores, that report to the New York Times. I know there's some things that we know, but there's no way. I don't know anybody that can, like, fully hack it. I wasn't trying to. I just was, like, trying to get the book to as many people as possible. But who
Mhm.
who knows? Who knows what was going to happen?
Okay, so you're part of a few very high profile wellness influencers and thought leaders who have declared war on food dyes and Kellogg
Yeah.
in general, Kellogg specifically. So I want to talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, what the genesis of that movement was. How did you get involved, and
Mhm.
what is your overall goal for yourself, for Dr. Will Cole,
Yeah.
for being a part of this conversation?
Yeah. Our new moniker is the serial killers. With
The
yeah,
serial killers. I love that.
with the C, guys, come on. But I invited you, to be honest with you, I invited you to come, but you couldn't make it, I don't think. But next time,
To come to where? Wisconsin or Michigan or one of
Michigan,
those
yeah,
places?
yeah, Michigan. Next time, man,
Okay.
next time. I wanted Light to come with us. I wanted him to like hold a meditation of channeling Light in around Kellogg's, but that's probably why they didn't have a meeting with us because you weren't there. But the anyway, so how I got involved was I've known a lot of these people for a long time, right? Being in the space. But yeah, Vani Hari, Dr. Josh Axe actually asked me to go to this. So he's a friend of mine and he just told me to, hey, want to come to Michigan? So we went to Michigan and all kind of spoke outside of the Kellogg's headquarters in Battle Creek, Michigan, which was a beautiful I'd never been to Michigan like that. I've been to Detroit's airport, but never got to explore Michigan like that. That was super fun. But yeah, but we all tried to make a change and raise awareness on this, and it really did. And what happened was Kellogg's didn't. We've served them over 400,000 signed petition, the biggest, to my knowledge, the biggest food petition in American history. Led fully. I have to give full credit to Vani Hari, Food Babe, and Jason Karp of Human Co. And this movement would never have got the legs and the expansion if it wasn't for them. And Vani's been a food activist for years. And Jason Karp in March of 2024 wrote an open letter to Kellogg's as a shareholder of Kellogg's to say why is American cereal, things like Fruit Loops and other cereals, why do they have artificial food dyes and they're colored with artificial food dyes when you go just across the, you know, Lake Michigan or Lake Erie to Canada, and it is the cereals are colored with vegetable extracts and fruit extracts. Similarly, in Australia and the EU and the UK, these artificial food dyes are highly regulated and require warning labels, and there's restrictions in its use, and they're instead colored with fruit and vegetable extracts. So that's just wanting Americans to be treated the same. And a lot of people in the health space, a good percentage of people didn't really get it because they know us and they know, well, even if the artificial food dyes are removed, you're not going to recommend this stuff. Yeah, we're not feeding our kids like the Canadian Fruit Lips. But the point is, there's a lot of kids in the public school system, 30 million kids in the public school system that are not fed well at home. They're not fed enough at home. They would starve if it wasn't for the public school system. And they depend on the public school system for their food. And they have no choice in this. And we are feeding them foods that have been shown to increase behavioral problems and autoimmune problems. And they don't have a choice. And it's paid for, at least to some degree, by taxpayer dollars. So it's this sort of insidious, we're creating perpetual customers to these junk foods as in their school. And then on top of that, the SNAP program, like the food assistance program, it is overwhelmingly preying on underprivileged kids and families. So it really was a conversation around that of, yeah, you're right. The wellness aficionados aren't going to eat this stuff, but most of the country aren't wellness aficionados. So if we're not going to speak out for these people, who will? Because they don't aren't interested in health and wellness, and they don't even know that they're getting served a different cereal than other countries, that these toxic ingredients are still here. But look, I mean, Kellogg's didn't do the right thing in that moment. I still feel like there's time to do it, and they're still gonna, as long as it's the law of the land, they're gonna let them eat chemicals is really their take on it. And but recently the FDA, I mean, there was reports, NBC News reported that the FDA could be banning red dye 3 at least within the next couple of weeks before the new administration comes in. and hopefully a lot more happens. But yeah, it's like the 11th hour, and now like we're hearing ripplings like of maybe some change with certain toxic ingredients, not just in food, but in. I also saw today the EPA is banning these two chemicals used in cleaning products. So a lot of things are happening because I think there's more and more awareness on something's got to change.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. It's tricky. It's kind of you're a root cause guy, right? So when we look at the root cause of these kinds of situations, probably it's not some mass conspiracy where they just want to, they want to kill poor people. Probably it's just they want to maximize profits for their
Yeah, that's
shareholders.
predominantly it. Yeah.
And there's some guy whose job it is to increase those margins and to look at. They probably brought some management consultant guy and said, "Look, only 10% of people really care about whether you use this food dye, so let's just use it
Yeah.
because 90% of people don't care. We've done the studies, we've done the surveys, blah blah blah." So I feel like how do we address the root cause of this issue? Because it's probably happening at RJ Nabisco, it's probably happening at Coca Cola, it's
Yeah.
probably happening at
It's
PepsiCo.
happening. Yeah, it's
All
happening
these.
a lot of places. So I don't know. I think well, I heard one report again. I think it was Spin or some outlet reported that in the 12 weeks since we went to Kellogg's and sort of raised a lot of conversations around it, like the whole conversation of Fruit Loops is now happening in governmental settings now of artificial food dyes in Kellogg's because of what happened in Battle Creek, Michigan, in part. Um, they said that Fruit Loop sales went down in 12 weeks, like about 54%. So I don't know. I think that people can vote with their dollar. I think that's one grassroots way of, the group, the serial killers, as we're lovingly called now, are using the hashtag cancel Kellogg's, which I'm conflicted in a way. I'm conflicted in that I think it gets to the point. I hate and I abhor cancel culture though. And I think that
Mhm.
we shouldn't be censoring Kellogg's in that way. I wanted Kellogg's to call them to something greater or raise awareness for people to vote with their dollar and say, you know what, I'm not going to buy that. I'm going to buy this instead. So they can have agency on their health and be pro informed consent on what they're consuming on a day to day basis. And it's interesting that a few friends of mine in this Rust Belt of Western Pennsylvania, I thought, okay, look, these are educated people. They were actually teachers that I'm talking about right now. They're public school teachers, smart people, work out, interested in health. They didn't know that artificial food dyes were bad. They were serving it for their kids on a daily basis, their kids and their own biological kids. So to me, I thought that was a big aha moment for me. It was like, well, if nothing else, it's raising awareness on these things that like, okay, let's start voting with our dollars in other areas. There's always going to be customers for Kellogg's. I want Kellogg's to thrive, but I want Kellogg's to do the right thing. And I want them to not come out with tons of health foods. That's not who Kellogg's is. But can they have better versions and for people to have informed consent? And if they want to have a Kellogg cereal, let's have it treated like every other country and pick the best option there. Or if they're going to have Fruit Loops, have one less toxic ingredient. So to me, I have a little bit more of a nuanced perspective on it because I don't want to like shut down Kellogg's and have some Orwellian state of the government telling companies how to run their life. But I think there's some basic human protection safety nets that we need when it comes to these ingredients that the FDA's equivalents in these other countries have determined that these ingredients are not good, artificial food dye specifically. So yeah, how do you get the I'm conflicted because I'm kind of a free market kind of guy in the sense of I don't want tons of intervention. But there's a
Mhm.
time and place for sensible regulations on things that we know don't need to keep being studied. They're just toxic. And when you can get the same outcome with a vegetable or fruit extract, maybe it's going to hurt your margins a little bit. But I truly believe that Kellogg's is use this as an example. Their sales could have skyrocketed if they did the right thing in that moment and said, look, we heard you. We want to come out with this brand new thing. And I think that many people within the wellness world would say kudos to Kellogg's and want to promote them even more, even though we wouldn't say it's a health food, of course. But we're going to say, look, this company heard the people and they want to do something better. I don't know. Maybe I'm like an eternal, like a naive optimist when it comes to that. But I do think that there can be a lot of other examples of companies that are wanting to be leaders instead of just doing things for profit, and this sort of old archaic way of doing food. Because you look at the natural food industry, look at Expo West every year in Anaheim. Is the largest natural food expo. It's massive. People are voting with their dollars, and you don't have massive companies like Pepsi and Coke and General Mills buying up these startup health food, better for you, healthy brands because of their they're just interested in health now because the money's there, because people are voting with their dollars. So I think that this can happen within their legacy brands too, of cereals that are like better than they used to be, and actually will help sales, in my opinion.
And also just the human mind, the cognitive dissonance, the confirmation bias, that I think that is also a factor in, how we spend our money. Because I grew up in Alabama. I used to love Fruit Loops, and all the Kellogg
Yeah.
cereals. In fact, they weren't sweet enough for me, so I would put sugar. I put, refined sugar in them so that
Oh,
you got it sweeter.
just to double up.
And if someone, yeah, exactly. And if someone, I mean, I probably would not have been, I probably wouldn't read some study about dyes or anything like that, as, in Alabama, because we ate mostly for taste and to get full, and that was it. There was no nutritional
Yeah.
consideration. So, in a lot of ways, food is like religion to a lot of
Oh
people,
yeah.
and getting them to change those habits
Yeah.
is, you're basically cutting them off of their whole,
Identity.
yeah, their identity
Yeah.
exactly. And um, so there's, I don't know, man. I don't know if because I live in Mexico and people smoke a lot of tobacco here, and then you can see on the tobacco packages, this will cause cancer. This is how your lungs are going to look if
Yeah.
you put this in your mouth. This is what your baby is going to,
Hmm.
how deformed they're going to be. People are still doing it,
Yeah.
so you see the extreme warnings, and it's like people are still doing it. And
Yeah.
I've even heard some people say natural tobacco is actually a health, it's a superfood. So it's like, we find that one study.
Mm.
Oh, red wine. Oh, that's a superfood.
Yeah.
I
There's
because it
resveratrol.
justifies what you want
Oh
to be
yeah,
doing
100%.
anyway.
Right, and you're right. I heard Bernie Sanders again. This is nonpartisan. I think both sides should be talking about these things. I heard Bernie Sanders talk about that very thing because he wants warning labels on the front of the boxes of food, and has been talking about these things for years, and how the FDA has been asleep at the wheel and not really interested in these things. So they're either inept or complicit, however you want to look at it, in this sort of broken food and healthcare system. The But his point was, with when they did it with tobacco, sales did go down considerably in the States. I don't know, around the world if they went down. So sales did go down and less people smoked. But you're right. That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying though. If let's say they put the warning label, or like these have been shown to da da da, there's still going to be people that smoke. There's still going to be Kellogg's customers. To me, it's like, okay, what even better would be like, how can you do this in a way that isn't going to harm people? You can't do that with cigarettes, in my opinion, but you can do that with cereal, where it's not going to be a health food, but it's going to be a better, less toxic, safe version of it. Yeah, you're right. There's always going to be cigarettes is an interesting one, where it's a good example of people still going to smoke, and cigarette companies still make lots of money. They probably don't make the money they used to make back in the day when even babies were smoking and walking around the streets. But
Mhm.
but they're still doing well for themselves. They're not like struggling out there to survive.
I'm of the age when I was born in the little baby, incubator, little, I don't know what it's called, but they the nurse brought me to my mom who was in the bed, and I had a little burn on my forehead, and the burn was because the nurse had a cigarette in her mouth as she was picking me up out of
What?
the little baby incubator
That
thing and
is
brought me to my,
horrible. Was your mom
like,
like,
everybody was walking around the hospital
yes?
smoking
Oh my gosh,
cigarettes.
that was life. That was life.
But
Yeah.
look, I'm not too I definitely keep up with what's happening in politics. I like the idea of Bobby Kennedy being, having something to do with the FDA and looking at some of that stuff. And um, I didn't vote for Trump, but I also didn't vote for Kamala Harris either. for
Are
my
you a
own
Jill
personal.
Stein guy? Is that who you were? You know,
I did vote for Jill Stein.
okay.
Yeah,
You,
but
hey,
I'm a resident of California too, so your vote probably made the
yeah,
difference in what
yeah.
happened in
Yeah, that's
Pennsylvania.
another reason why I like being
But
here. I determine elections over here.
yeah, it's so crazy.
Yeah,
But I like how Bobby Kennedy is going to be a part of this, and I like the make America healthy again and all that
yeah,
stuff. You've known him for a while,
yeah,
so what do people get wrong about? Not that you're the expert on Bobby
yeah,
Kennedy, but just being in the health
yeah.
space and knowing how he is, and what do people get wrong about
Oh,
what his
they get
intentions are,
so
and what?
much wrong on. I mean, you talk about how much negative spin. Look, I am not a surrogate for Bobby Kennedy. I am not paid to talk about him. I just know enough about him and to know that what you read in the press is completely taken out of context, spun, smear campaigns, hit pieces, hyperbolic headlines, and it beyond that noise and hyperbole. There is a principled man who doesn't want to take people's vaccines away, doesn't want to take people's like right to have whatever junk food that they want. He just wants to have actually all sensible democratic positions that Democrats and left leaning people have wanted for decades. Now he's painted to be this sort of woo woo crackpot, but it's really he just wants when it comes to vaccines specifically, he's just wants the same level of science and rigor that any other medication can have, and these special protections that vaccine manufacturers have that other pharmaceutical drugs don't have has to go away because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if we're going to have vaccines, which we are, how can we have them the most safe, effective way? And the nuance and context is lost on people. It is like a religion in this country where you feel we have an industry, the pharmaceutical industry, that gave us the opioid crisis, knowingly made people addicts. We somehow feel like they had their come to Jesus moment when it comes to vaccines and they wouldn't hide and suppress information. When now we know with the Pfizer papers, that's absolutely not the case. They wanted these side effects from these vaccines to be hidden for 75 years because we know that there was potential side effects. Now you can make the argument more good than bad, maybe you can make that argument, but there wasn't informed consent. To have informed consent, you need to know the benefits and the relative risks and decide for yourself. But when you get mandates involved and people would lose their job without getting this vaccine, then there's a massive freedom of choice decision that we have. We have a massive legal problem now on our hands with what our government did during the pandemic. So all this nuance is lost. I mean, the news likes the clickbait sensationalism, but you look at the biggest advertisers in our legacy media, it's pharmaceutical industries is a big player in that, and they don't want someone that's going to reform the system that they have taken to the bank for decades. So yeah, it's a massive corrupt system, and you have to have an independent person that's not bought out to actually make some change. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with them on everything, but can we see some good? And I think when you look at people, I mean, Bobby Kennedy's been a Democrat his entire life. The Democrat Party is what has left him. He has not left it. And you have brave people on the left, like Bernie Sanders, like Cory Booker, like Tim Ryan, a former congressman in Ohio, that are brave enough to say, you know what, we may not agree with him on everything, but we definitely agree with him on this corrupt system, and we're going to find common ground here. So time will tell. Time will tell. I think the big critique of this whole system of the whole situation with Maha is, will Trump just use Bobby? Did he use him for just getting votes? Time will tell on that. You know, I get people's hesitation on that. But when you look at the state of how things are, we have a rare opportunity to make some change, at least potential for change. But I see people clinging so firmly to their self-righteousness and their derangement and their lacking pragmatism on if we even have a small opportunity to make some positive change when it comes to our food industry and health industry, why wouldn't we at least be hopeful that it could happen? Why do we have to be such, lack of a better word, Karens about every potential good that could come there? So I have a problem with it because that's like I look at the people that I know personally that are interested in health, interested in food, but just because Trump is for it, they're going to be against it. Like, how narrow-minded and intolerant are we? We end up being, when you serve your tribalism over people, you serve your party over people, you become just as small-minded and intolerant as the people that you hate. And I see that happening on the left a lot. Their orthodoxy, their raging for the machine, is a complete abandonment of their liberal ideas, meaning liber, free, freedom, free thought, free speech, free decision. So I'm a passionate advocate for that, as you can tell, and I think I'm holding out hope for independent-minded people of both sides that want just positive change, and that's their primary goal.
Yeah. I think that will ultimately be good for us as a society, is for more people to be more independent
Yeah,
than to be on the left or on the right. And you can just make it does, it causes you to have to really think and research and,
yeah,
and weigh these options. You can't just kind of mail it in every year like we're used to doing. So I think that is a good thing to come out of this. My prediction is that not much is going to change in terms of the FDA and the health, because it's so deeply driven by capitalist interests. But I think that, like you said, he's going to be able to expose a lot of sunlight
yeah,
and see, okay, these are the real. We thought this was the issue, but actually, these are the real mechanisms that are driving this whole thing, and this is what we need to focus on in the next um,
yeah,
election, and maybe 2 or 3 elections from now.
yeah,
Then things will start to change. But somebody has to get in there and just with a microscope and start looking
yeah,
at this stuff.
yeah. I agree with you. Only so much can change. I think we're talking about it's not going to be some massive overhaul, I think, but at least some sunlight, which has never happened before in our lifetime, at least, if ever,
Yeah.
if ever.
And these guys have 5, 6 layers of protection.
Yeah,
These moneyed interests.
yeah,
They're not setting themselves up to be taken over by one renegade
no,
guy who's in there with a sledgehammer.
yeah,
They've anticipated this
yeah,
for years.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Time will tell.
Has Kellogg's come after you guys?
Yes,
Has
yes. Front
corporate
groups have.
lawyers and stuff sent you letters and
Yeah,
trying to shut you down and
yeah.
all
Well,
this
they
stuff?
don't do directly. They pay front groups with very sciencey sounding names to
Mhm.
delegitimize.
Discredit
Yeah,
you. You're a quack. You don't know what you're talking
yeah.
about.
They have. Me and Vani Hari specifically, because we're probably the two of the most vocal that's in health, and they're an easy like like we're easy targets for them. But it's to me, if groups like that aren't coming after you, like, are we doing the right thing? Are we making a difference? To me, it's a sign that we are making a difference, and that's why they have to pay these front groups to like this writer to like write something, and then because of the Freedom of Information Act, you can find out. Oh, wait, they get their funding from big chemical, big food, big ag, big pharma. I see it as like a badge of honor.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, look, you're fighting the good fight out there. Congratulations on doing that. I think it inspires other people to step up and go to those front lines
Yeah.
in a way that they wouldn't if they didn't see someone that they recognize or someone that they respected up there.
Thanks,
So,
man.
just want
Appreciate
to
it.
acknowledge you for that, and just appreciate you coming on and
Yeah.
sharing a bit of your story and your perspective. And I'm sure we'll piss some people off in the comments with political discussion at the end, but
Hey.
we got to be able to talk about everything.
Yeah.
If we want to change anything, you got to be able to talk about everything. And just
Everything.
like when people come to you, you know, just like I've reached out to you privately and I've said, hey man, I want to talk about my testosterone. I want to talk
Yeah.
about, you got to talk about everything,
Yeah.
and it's not, it's there's layers to this stuff. There's
Yeah.
levels to this stuff.
Absolutely. We need to have a free exchange of ideas again. Like, make speech free again. And that, like, the speech that offends us the most is the speech we should be protecting. And the speech,
You should
and
be
we need to be able to hear things that we don't agree with without wanting to shut it down or deplatform them, or why can't we have these conversations? Like, Americans had them for years, and now all of a sudden it's just like you can't go there. But I think it's important, especially because it's intersecting with health right now. It's intersecting with food, and that's going
like you
back.
said, everything is health, bro.
Yeah,
Watching the news
yeah,
and being stressed out over election, that's affecting your
yeah,
gut biome. That's affecting
yeah,
your 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 brain
Yeah.
health. All of that is health.
Right. And people need to learn. They can always turn it off. They don't have to listen to it. If it's awakening some triggering thing in you, move on.
And you can have different. You can be on the front lines and not want the thing to get canceled.
Right.
You just want them to make this little change right now. You don't have to buy into every point on the checklist of
Totally.
whatever someone's agenda is to have an
Absolutely.
opinion or to be able to voice your opinion.
Yeah. I'd go to Kellogg's right now and be like, let's come up with an awesome line. Still have your junk food cereals, fine, but like let's come up with like an awesome SKU that's like healthier. I want the best for Kellogg's, and I want the best for Kellogg's customers. I don't need to shut anybody down. I don't think anybody should be shut down. I just want us to do better.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I think it's a good
Thanks,
place to
man.
end it. Thank you very much. Great to see
Nice
you,
to see
and
you,
hope
man.
to see you again soon in person.
Yes, let's do it.
Thank you so much for watching. Just FYI, we post a new video almost every day, so make sure you comment and subscribe below so you don't miss out on anything. And if you enjoyed this video, I think you're really going to love this one as well. And if you ever want to see a playlist of all of my podcasts or all of the plot twists or any other category of videos, you can find links to those in the description below.